Good afternoon, my friends. Today we are going to talk about iconic Australian sites. It's another lecture that concerns the country studies section, yes, which might be on your contest task. Okay, so today we're going to talk about famous Australian sites. These are mainly natural sites, yes, but there are also some places and sites built by the Australians, yes. So on this sunny day, so we're going to talk about sunny Australia. And the first site that we're going to talk about is the famous Sydney Opera House. Of course, you heard a lot about Sydney Opera House, and of course, you know it because this is the most spectacular landmark, yes, the most famous landmark in Australia. It is situated in Sydney, in New South Wales. New South Wales is a state in Australia, and so this building has a very interesting history. It is actually built on the site of a former tram depot. Yes, there was a tram depot, and before this tram depot, there was a fort on this place. Yes, and then at the end of the 50s, a decision was taken to build the Opera House in Sydney, and now you can see the Sydney Opera House. It has a very interesting history. Some people think that the Sydney Opera House resembles the sails of a ship. Yes, sails of a ship. But actually the architect, yes, I think the Norwegian architect, was actually inspired by the orange peels, yes, lying on the table. Yes, so it's interesting. He saw the orange peels lying on the table, and he decided to design a building resembling these orange peels. So let's learn something about the Sydney Opera House. Sydney Opera House, it is actually the UNESCO World Heritage Site, is not only Australia's most famous landmark. This unique structure is one of the world's most instantly recognizable and iconic buildings. In 1956, an international competition to design an opera house for Sydney was held. Yes, Jorn Utzon from Norway had his extraordinary design declared the winner on January 29th, 1957. So the construction of Sydney Opera House started on the 1st of March 1959, yes, and the Sydney Opera House actually opened in 1973 and has become Australia's top tourist attraction. So I will tell you a little story about this house, and it actually this opera house actually proved to be a financial disaster. Yes, because originally it was planned to spend only $7 million, 7 million Australian dollars on this opera house. It was planned that the opera house would be built in 4 years. So it was planned that the opera house would take only 4 years to build. But actually, the opera house took more than 10 years to build. Yes, more than 10 years. Excluding the time for designing, yes, the building. So it took 10 years to build, yes, 10 years to build. And instead of $7 million, the Australian government spent $100 million. So can you imagine? So such a famous world site, UNESCO World Heritage Site, but it actually was a financial disaster for Australia. As I've said, it was opened in 1973, it was opened and it was inaugurated, yes, by Elizabeth II, who was also the Queen of Australia at that time. Yes, she was also the Queen of Australia. And so there were crowds of people, and the opera house was opened when the one of Beethoven's symphonies was played. So it was a major event in history of Sydney. But this building has such an interesting story. And so why did it take such a long time to build this opera house? Actually, the constructing the halls, yes, and some internal finishing, yes, of the opera house took a long time. Yes, it was built, but it took a long time to finish the interior of this opera house. So, of course, you know this landmark, and I hope that you have learned something new about the Sydney Opera House. Another famous landmark in Sydney is Sydney Harbour Bridge. Sydney Harbour Bridge. It is also situated in Sydney, New South Wales. New South Wales is a state in Australia, and it actually overlooks the Sydney Opera House. This bridge has an interesting history too. The Sydney Harbour Bridge is an Australian heritage-listed steel through-arch bridge across Sydney Harbour that carries rail, vehicular, bicycle and pedestrian traffic between the Sydney Central Business District and the North Shore. The North Shore is a collection of suburbs, yes, in the north of Sydney. The bridge is nicknamed the Coat Hanger because of its arch-based design. So it looks like a coat hanger. That's why it has such a nickname. Under the direction of John Bradfield, the bridge was designed and built by British firm Dorman Long of Middlesbrough, who based the design of their 1928 Tyne Bridge in Newcastle upon Tyne. And this bridge opened in 1932, so a long time ago, 1932. The bridge's general design, which Bradfield tasked the New South Wales Department of Public Works with producing, was a rough copy of the Hell Gate Bridge in New York City. So you can have a look at the Hell Gate Bridge in New York City, and you can see that it actually resembles the Sydney Harbour Bridge. But it is also a famous landmark of Australia and a famous landmark of Sydney, of course. So, as I've said, Australia boasts many natural sites, yes, and many human-built sites, yes. So, one of the natural sites is Uluru. Uluru in Northern Territory in Australia. Northern Territory is not a state, it's a huge territory in the north of Australia. So it's a very interesting rock and a very interesting place. It is called Uluru. So let's learn something about it. Located in the heart of the Northern Territory and Australia, in the heart of Australia, Uluru, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, formerly known as Ayers Rock, is the world's largest monolith. Yes, monolith. And it is interesting that it is situated in the center of the desert. Noted for its natural and cultural value, it is certainly one of the most well-known Aussie landmarks. Aussie landmarks, my friends, it means Australian landmarks. Yes, Aussie, remember this word. And the greatest of all Australian landforms if you are touring and sightseeing down under. So what is down under? Down under is a nickname for Australia, remember it. So a UNESCO World Heritage Site, Uluru, is sacred to the indigenous people of the area. So for the Australian Aborigines, so Uluru is a sacred site, yes. Standing 348 meters high, it makes for an imposing sight in contrast to the flat desert landscape. So it is interesting because it is situated in the center of the desert. Yes, spanning 3.5 kilometers long and nearly 2 kilometers wide. It is a popular stop on overland tours. So the people who are touring Australia, yes, people who would like to know more about the nature of Australia, yes, so they can tour Australia, they can watch this spectacular Uluru rock, yes, so it is, remember that it is also called the Ayers Rock, yes, so a great monolith in the center of Australia. Another site, another famous site and a natural landmark of Australia is the Great Barrier Reef. Of course, you've heard about the Great Barrier Reef, and it is one of the treasures, of the natural treasures of Australia. It is situated off the east coast of the Queensland state, Australia. So Queensland is a large and very beautiful state in Australia. So the Great Barrier Reef, it is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site, is the world's largest coral reef system composed of over 2,900 individual reefs and 900 islands stretching for over 2,300 kilometers over an area of approximately 344,000 square kilometers. Diving, snorkeling, and scuba diving should certainly be at the top of your list. So it's a very popular place for divers, for scuba divers, and it is an impressive site. So Australia is unique because it has many natural UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Yes, so the majority of them are natural. Yes, but some of them were man-built, as you know. So the Great Barrier Reef. If you would like to know something else about this barrier reef, you can link to the sites, and the links are listed at the end of my presentation. The next site, the next famous site in Australia is Port Arthur. Port Arthur, yes. You know, there is Port Arthur, former Port Arthur in China, yes, which was one of the sites of the Russian-Japanese War, but Port Arthur is situated in Tasmania, in Australia. You know, Tasmania is an island, and it is a state in Australia. Why is Port Arthur interesting? Port Arthur, also a UNESCO World Heritage Site, is a town and former convict settlement on the Tasman Peninsula in Tasmania, Australia. Why is it interesting? So convict settlement, it means actually a prison, yes, a prison, and it was one of the prison sites in the British Empire, yes, where the convicts were sent, yes, were sent for some crimes, yes. So the British Empire had a large system of convict settlements and prisons, and Port Arthur was one of them. It is located approximately 97 kilometers southeast of the state capital, Hobart. Yes, the site forms part of the Australian convict sites, consisting of 11 remnant panel sites originally built within the British Empire during the 18th and the 19th centuries on fertile Australian coastal strips. So interesting. So it is quite interesting to learn the history of the British Empire, yes, and you see these panel sites, actually the places where the convicts, yes, where the prisoners were sent. These panel sites were built on the coastal strips, yes, in Australia, for example, yes, and it is on an island which was isolated, yes. That's why the convicts, so the prisoners, were sent there. So Port Arthur is a UNESCO World Heritage Site because it has So it has the places, yes, and the traces of the British Empire penal system, yes, of the 18th and the 19th centuries. So Port Arthur is an interesting place in Tasmania, Australia. The next interesting natural site is Kakadu National Park. It is also situated in Northern Territory in Australia. Northern Territory, you know, it's an area, special area in the north of Australia. And why is this national park interesting? The Kakadu National Park, again, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, is located within the Alligator Rivers region of the Northern Territory. It covers an area of 19,804 square kilometers, extending nearly 200 kilometers from north to south and over 100 kilometers from east to west. It is the size of Wales. So can you imagine? Wales is a country in Britain, yes, it's a part of Britain, and so the Kakadu National Park, just one national park, is the size of Wales. About 1/3 the size of Tasmania and nearly half the size of Switzerland. So one national park is half the size of Switzerland. So you know that Australia is a continent, yes? It's a huge country and huge continent, yes? And so that's why it has such scales, yes? So one national park is nearly half the size of Switzerland. Why is this national park interesting? So it is actually the place for various habitats of different species, yes, animal species and bird species, yes. And it is interesting because the Ranger uranium mine, one of the most productive uranium mines in the world, is surrounded by the park, yes. So can you imagine, the uranium mine is in the center of this park, and it still works, it operates, and uranium is a dangerous element, and still it is mined, it is produced in this national park, Kakadu National Park, Northern Territory, Australia. The next site is also very interesting, 12 Apostles in Victoria State in Australia. You know, in Australia there are territories, for example, the Northern Territory, and states, yes? So Victoria is a state in Australia. You can see these rocks standing not far from the shore, yes? And if you look at the foreground, yes, you see the remnants of one of the rocks of one of the apostles. It actually collapsed, I think, in 2005. And so there are some remaining rocks which are called 12 Apostles in Victoria, Australia. So they were created by constant erosion of the limestone cliffs of the mainland beginning from 10 to 20 million years ago. The stormy Southern Ocean and blasting winds gradually eroded the softer limestone, yes, forming caves in the cliffs. So how did these 12 apostles appear? So the blasting winds, yes, and the ocean made them, yes, so they formed caves in the cliffs. The caves eventually became arches, and when they collapsed, rock stacks up to 45 meters high were left isolated from the shore. View the 12 apostles at sunrise and sunset as they change color from dark and foreboding in shadow to brilliant sandy yellow under a full sun. So it's a very interesting natural site, which is called 12 Apostles, and hope you will be able to see them someday in Victoria, Australia. The next site, famous Australian site, is Melbourne Cricket Ground. Yes, so again, you see, today our presentation covers both man-made and natural sites. Yes, Melbourne Cricket Ground, which is situated in Melbourne, Australia, is a famous site. It's a famous cricket stadium. Yes, cricket stadium. So you see how many people attend this cricket match, and it is quite understandable because Australia was once a part of the British Empire, and that's why these British games, yes, so for example cricket, yes, and the rugby, for example, they're very popular in Australia, and there is also an Australian football team which actually, you remember, played one of the matches in Samara in 2018. So Melbourne Cricket Ground. The Melbourne Cricket Ground, MCG, also known simply as the G, interesting, yes, so it is called also as the G, is an Australian sports stadium located in Yarra Park in Melbourne. Founded and managed by the Melbourne Cricket Club, it is the largest stadium in the Southern Hemisphere. Yes, so you see, the largest stadium in the Southern Hemisphere, the 11th largest globally, and the second largest cricket ground by capacity after Moterra Stadium. The MCG is within walking distance of the city centre and is served by Richmond and Jolimont railway stations. So you see, the stadium is so huge that it is served by 2 railway stations, yes, as well as the Route 70 tram. Also, there is a tram line, yes, serving this stadium. It is adjacent to Melbourne Park and is part of the Melbourne Sports and Entertainment Precinct. So I think the stadium is huge, and it is one of the sites of Australia, one of the famous sites of Australia. The next site that I would like to talk to you about is Bondi Beach. I like this picture very much. So the beach actually looks fantastic. Yes, Bondi Beach, which is situated in Sydney in New South Wales. New South Wales is a state in Australia in which the city of Sydney is located, and so you can have a look at this marvelous beach and waves. So let's learn something more about this beach. Situated within one of the world's most intriguing cities, epitomizing the Australian lifestyle. Broadcast internationally, Bondi Beach is one of the most well-known beaches in the world. The kilometer-long stretch of Golden Beach, nestled in a sparkling bay, has long been celebrated for its iconic sun, surf, sand, and community. So let me go back to the picture and see this beach and the city of Sydney actually symbolize the Australian lifestyle. Yes, what is the Australian lifestyle? It's a very laid back, yes, a very vibrant lifestyle. Yes, people actually are calm, but at the same time they enjoy life. They enjoy sun, they enjoy communication. Yes. And actually, these things can often be seen in beaches. Yes, when people lie in the sun, when they communicate, when they have rest, when they bathe. Yes, when they have a great time, when they have fun. Yes, and it is actually the symbol of Australian lifestyle, and this Bondi Beach is a symbol of it too. Next site, Australian site, I would like to tell you about is Shark Bay, which is situated in Western Australia. It is also a state or maybe a territory. Shark Bay is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So you see, Australia boasts so many UNESCO listed heritage sites. Most of them are natural. Yes, so spectacular Shark Bay is one of Australia's most famous wildlife areas. from several thousand-year-old stromatolites to friendly dolphins, whales, whale sharks, sea turtles and dugongs, and much more. This is one famous landmark not to miss if you're heading down under with a love of nature. So I like these words. I took them from the websites which I consulted, and so if you are heading down under, it means if you are going to Australia, yes, and if you would love to see Australian nature, this is a place not to be missed. Shark Bay. So you can see stromatolites, structures created by microbes, yes. You can also see many sea animals and fish. So I'm sure it's a special, very special Australian place. Next place I would like to talk to you about is Ballarat. Ballarat, which is situated, it's a town which is situated in the state of Victoria in Australia. Why is this town interesting, Ballarat? Ballarat was transformed from a small sheep station into a bustling mining town when gold was discovered in 1851. So Australia also experienced a gold rush, yes, when gold was discovered in Ballarat. Even with discoveries still being made today, this landmark of Australia is not most famous for its gold. Aussies means Australians. Aussies know it for being the site of the rebellion at the Eureka Stockade, the only civil rebellion that ever took place in the country. So you know that Australia is a very calm country, yes, calm country, but you know from the previous lecture that the Australian soldiers participated in the Second World War, yes, but Australia is a very calm and peaceful country, but the only rebellion that took place in Australia was in Ballarat when the miners rebelled against the government, yes. And an interesting fact about this rebellion, you can also find more information on internet. An interesting fact about this rebellion is that the leaders, yes, of this rebellion, they were tried, but the courts found them not guilty. So the court didn't find any guilt. Yes, and one of the leaders of this rebellion was elected a member of parliament. Yes, later. So Ballarat in Victoria is famous as the site of the rebellion in Australia. So you can have a look at the websites that I used to prepare this presentation. So Wikipedia is interesting because it contains very, very essential information in a very simple form. Yes, that's why I also consult Wikipedia from time to time. So I think that's all for today, my friends. Thank you for your attention and see you soon. Thank you.